All right, I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for registering today for June 21st, 2022 for our joint reverse pitch here with Israel Investment Fund Group with Noah on the call as well. I want to thank you for joining this morning and the evening time for those of you in Israel. Briefly about us, we're 45 offices globally. A lot of you are familiar with us, but a lot of you, this is a new session. So I wanted to go ahead and introduce who we are, who I am, and how these sessions work. So my name's Randall Fink. I'm the head of investment here at the office. I'm here in San Francisco, working in the office every day, occasionally going to meetings around town and around the valley. But our office goes and works with a huge chunk of the West Coast of the United States. We actually cover 17 different states, so not just California and the Bay Area, but a lot of the Western United States. We also have 3 other offices in the US, in New York and DC and in Houston, and then 45 offices globally. So a lot of those markets around the world, a lot of the big cities. So if you're interested in penetrating any of those markets, we probably have some people on the ground doing that. And we all do the same thing. Our goal is to go ahead and connect Israeli companies with investors in those territories, but also with corporations, so large, medium, and small size enterprises. But my focus right now is for matching investors with appropriate Israeli startups. And we do that with our warm network. So like Noah here, and then other investors that I'm on good terms with, I go ahead and share deal flow with them and kind of send them relevant Israeli companies to see if it makes sense to have those introductions. So that's really our advantage here on the West Coast, is those introductions and the warm network that we have with various investors, whether that's in a traditional venture capital firm, a corporate venture firm, angel investors, or really anybody else that does investing out here. They connect with me, and then I go ahead and connect them with appropriate startups based upon what they're looking for, the stage, check size, etc. That's it about that. I'll go ahead and talk about the rules of this session here. Basically, I'm going to have you guys muted. He's going to go ahead and run through his presentation. Then afterwards, I'll go ahead and allow you guys to unmute yourselves and ask any questions that you want. Of course, you can always enter those into the chat as well. But with that, I'll go ahead and introduce our investor here for today. And and then I'll go ahead and talk about his firm as well. So Noah works at IIFG, which is Israel Investment Fund Group. So they're a private LA-based investment firm investing in Israeli companies and Israeli-related startups and assets as well. They're sector and stage agnostic, but primarily they invest in various healthcare sectors such as biotech, medtech, medical devices, etc. But they do invest in other areas as well. Their check sizes are going to range anywhere from 250,000 up to 2 million, but they tend to be around the $500,000 mark. So Noah, he's the vice president of investments of IIFG. So he has experience in various stages of the private investment ecosystem. Prior to IIFG, he worked at Navigate Ventures, which is an early growth enterprise SaaS fund. And prior to that, he was a student analyst at USC Marshall's Venture Fund, that's University of Southern California, which primarily invests in very early stage startups. In his free time, he supports causes that are very close to him, such as the Jewish Federation's JTech initiative and his synagogue, as well as his Rotary Club. Yeah, and with that, I'll go ahead and send it over to Noah, who can run through this presentation for you guys. And please feel free to ask questions throughout the conversation in case anything strikes you as interesting or if you're confused about anything. But with that, Noah, go ahead and take over.
Thank you very much, Randall. Appreciate it. So I'm Noah Edesami. I'm the Vice President of Investments at Israel Investment Fund Group. Shalom to everyone. Thanks for being here. All right, how do I switch slide? There we go. So as Randall mentioned, IIFG is a private investment firm based in Los Angeles. We solely invest in Israeli and Israel-related startups and assets. Our leadership team starts with Dr. Hiri Edesami, managing partner, David Wolberg, managing partner, Jared Shemp is our COO, and that's me, Noah Edesami, Vice President of Investments. Hiri was born in Tehran, Iran.
No, sorry, we're seeing your camera and not slides.
What was that?
We're seeing your camera and not the slides.
I can't hear you. I apologize.
I'm seeing the slide just fine, actually.
Well,
Yeah, we're getting both of them just fine.
You go ahead now.
Okay. Sorry, I couldn't hear. So here he was born in Iran, but moved to the United States during the revolution because it wasn't Iran wasn't a great place to be Jewish in after the revolution. And by trade, he's a dentist, but I really think he got into the wrong field. Since he's been a dentist for the past over 30 years, he's always been very entrepreneurial. He had a couple startups himself and has invested in various venture capital capacities and private equity capacities. He's also very involved with his synagogue, with his Beth Jacob congregation in California, which is the largest modern Orthodox synagogue in the state. David Wohlberg is a securities lawyer by trade. He's a graduate of Yale Law School. And while he was there, he was an editor of the Yale Law Journal. In addition to his legal practice, David has also been very involved in startups, and he has helped finance and put together many, mostly biotech companies. He also was previously the president of a NASDAQ-listed immuno-oncology company, and he's currently an officer and director of a private clinical stage ophthalmology company developing treatments for rare retinal diseases. David is also very involved in his synagogue, which is the Synagogue for the Performing Arts, which is Rabbi Joseph Telushkin's shul, if any of you are familiar with that rabbi. Jared Shemp, our COO, is a JD MBA from Syracuse. He really is one of the most organized and operationally gifted people I've ever met. Along with his legal background and MBA background, he has lots of experience in private equity and family offices as well. And he has had leadership roles in startups in the past too. And this is me. Randall kind of touched on this already, but previously, before IIFG, I was at Navigate Ventures, which is an early growth fund. And prior to that, I was at USC's Marshall Venture Fund. So I have experience in different stages of venture capital, from very early stage to kind of early growth stage. And now IIFG generally comes in at Series A. Something that we're very proud of at IIFG is our wonderful board of advisors. This is just a partial list, but here we have Andre Iancu, who was the former head of the US Patent and Trademark Office. We have Professor Moshe Shoham, who is the head of robotics at Technion and the founder of Mazor Robotics. We have Shuli Moalem Rafaeli, who is a former Knesset member and involved in politics in Israel. We have Professor Ediel Pinker, who is the vice dean of the Yale School of Management. We have Hillel Fuld, who is an internationally known tech blogger and a very popular tech blogger in Israel. We have Dr. Jeremy Jacobs, who's the head of geriatrics at Hadassah Hospital. And we have Aryeh Tesler, who is a former brigadier general in the IDF and is an expert on security matters. So when we started in late 2018, we decided to do everything in an SPV and syndication manner. So we would put in our own capital and we would bring in friends and family to every investment that we made. We've made 4 investments in that method, including a follow-on, which we're going to discuss in a second. But recently, with feedback from our IIFG investor base, we have decided to transition into a traditional fund. But I will go over our previous investments now. Our very first investment was actually in a winery called Jezreel Valley Winery in the Galilee region of Israel. When we invested in Jezreel in 2019, they were bottling approximately 57,000 bottles a year. And in 2021, they ended up bottling over 95,000 bottles, even with the difficulties of COVID. Now the winery is the 4th largest exporter to the United States among Israeli boutique wineries and the #1 fastest growing winery in Israel. They actually very recently scored a 96 on their Argamon wine, which from my understanding was the highest scoring Israeli wine of the year. We came across Jezreel through a family friend of ours and one of our business contacts who was a CFO of a NASDAQ listed cybersecurity firm and was one of the original investors in Jezreel. And we invested $475,000 in the winery. Our next investment was CAPS Medical. They are creating a minimally invasive device for cancer treatment, primarily for solid tumors in internal organs using cold atmospheric plasma. The company recently started its clinical testing in Sheba and Mayer Hospital. CAPS is backed by the Technion, Rambam, Boston Scientific, and other strategic partners. We found CAPS from a leading Israeli medical technology incubator who we work closely with. We invested $712,000 and co-led CAPS's Series A. Our next investment was Nanox, which is an imaging company that is developing a system to produce digital X-ray sources at a fraction of the cost of normal machines and have remote radiology screenings, and create a device that only costs $10,000, where they can put in different areas of the world, primarily in third world countries where they can't, afford $3 million MRI machines. We were brought Nanox by a longtime friend and co-investor in investments prior to IIFG, who was an early Nanox investor. And actually for this investment, we did a secondary transaction. We purchased 100,000 shares from said investor, early investor, through a Nanox board-approved transaction. And the price that we paid was great, and we paid the same price that large strategic investors paid a few months prior to our transaction. And these investors include SK Telecom, Foxconn, and Fuji. Now Nanox is public and trades under the ticker NNOX on the NASDAQ. Our most recent investment is TrizzleX. TrizzleX created a technology that allows landlords to very easily and cheaply submeter water usage in apartment buildings. In California, particularly in other parts of the United States, it's a big problem because apartment buildings only have one water meter. So the landlord ends up paying for everyone's water, whereas the tenants pay for gas and electricity, which are traceable back to their units. In addition to the submetering uses that TrizzleX provides, they also provide very specific and real-time leak detection. So it'll announce within a few minutes if there's a leak in, unit 4112's kitchen faucet. We were introduced to TrizzleX by the leadership of an international and corporate-backed incubator that we work closely with, and we actually exclusively funded TrizzleX's Series A at $1 million. The only other investor was their law firm, which was Latham & Watkins, that invested alongside us. We think Israel is the spot to be in now, and has the best innovation in the world, which is why we only invest in Israel and Israeli startups. As I'm sure many of you know, Israel is the world leader in startups per capita. Israel has the highest R&D to GDP ratio. Israel has a very, very highly educated citizen base and people that live there. We also believe that the mandatory military service provides, or I guess fosters, a mindset that the entrepreneurs have in Israel that's really unmatched. In addition to that, Israel's VC ecosystem is not only thriving, but it's growing. Just some facts about this growing ecosystem. In 2021, $25.6 billion were raised by Israeli startups in 773 financing rounds. There were $22.2 billion in high-tech exits last year as well. There were 315 early stage deals that brought $2.7 billion in investment. And on the growth stage side, $22.9 billion were raised in 458 deals. There are a huge increase in VC-backed deals, in the last few years, and there were 516 VC-backed funding rounds in 2021. Also, what we see is a trend that investors in the Israeli ecosystem are going towards later stage, which we find unique for us and an opportunity for us to come in at an earlier stage where there are less investors, and also where we can provide better pricing for our investors. And in addition to that, there were 33 new Israeli unicorns in 2021, which for a country the size of Los Angeles County in population is unbelievable. So why IIFG? We think we are, positioned in a very strategic and good way. We come in at a area where the investors are a little bit lacking. We have a lot of investors at earlier stages before us, and at later stages. Also, we have developed really good relationships with, medical incubators, research institutions such as Technion and Hadassah, academic institutions that give us really great deal flow. Also, we think our board of advisors, which we showed you earlier, are really a value add, with not only helping us do due diligence, but supporting our portfolio companies after our investments are made. And also, we're based in the United States, which could be a value add as well. Why now? We view Israel as California real estate in the 1950s. We just see it poised for a significant and rapid expansion, especially now with the Abraham Accords. We think this is the right time and the right place to be. Why are we opportunistic? So as Randall mentioned, we're generally healthcare focused, but we are open to anything. And we think this is important because, we aren't strict with our investment criteria, which allows us to really take in any good opportunity that we find and that our advisors can help us with. But we are healthcare focused, and we think this is a positive in a way, because unfortunately we believe that we're going to be going into not the best economic times, and healthcare has been shown to perform well under these circumstances as well. So here's a little overview of our fund. Geography: we invest in companies in Israel. We primarily invest in early stage, but we are open to other opportunities as well, including late stage and secondaries, such as our Nanox investment. Our check size is between $250,000 to $2 million, and our follow-on check size is $100,000 and up. Here's some of the service providers that we use, which are really grade A. For legal in the United States, we use DLA Piper, and our law firm in Israel is Shabolet. Our bank is First Republic Bank. Our accountants are BKD, and our fund administrator is Cornerstone. And that is IIFG. Thank you very much. And now if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that, Noah. Very insightful, and also to hear about your unique advantage. So obviously, that's very important for choosing the investor, as well as figuring out if it's a right match. Obviously, that's the point of what I'm doing here, is to make sure that the startups here on the call see that it's a good match, or if it's not a good match, to reach out. So I guess to begin with, I'll just ask the question: what are your interest areas for this year?
This year, we probably medical devices. That's just what we see. We see digital health. Digital health has become very popular, but we also think, given that popularity that has emerged during COVID, pricing is a little rich. So it's not something that we're gonna not do, but that's a trend that I'm seeing, which may kind of not be the best fit for us.
It looks like we have some questions in the chat as well. First one is, do you invest in public companies?
Do we invest in public companies? We have not yet, but we probably won't. We're technically allowed to, but I don't think we will, just because that's not where we're used to.
Awesome. And then we have a question about due diligence. How fast do you make your decisions after meeting a company?
That's a good question. It varies. We now with our fund, we're able to move quicker than with our SPV model. So it could be, and also if they have a lead investor, it also depends on a lot of different factors. If they have a lead investor already, if any due diligence was already done, that could be shared with us. If they don't have a lead investor, if we're the first people looking at it, that adds a lot of time as well. But it could be anywhere from a few weeks to a few months, depending on the situation.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I'm gonna keep running through these questions in the chat, but you guys are allowed to unmute yourselves at this point here. So I'll start here. Is a neuroclinical company relevant for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. That was from Neuro Audit Israel from Dan here.
Great.
Next, Eric Klein asks, you said that you do A rounds, but you also do seed rounds. What determines when you would lead a non-medical seed round?
Would we lead a non-medical seed round? Was that the question?
Yeah. What would determine if you do or don't?
Well, one thing that we generally do not do, or we don't do safes. So we do equity, which, that is, safes are more popular in seed rounds, but not everyone does it. I think if we're going to lead a seed round, I think there's no strict criteria. It just depends on the opportunity. If something that we understand or we can understand given our network, and if the pricing is right and the terms are right, there's no reason why we wouldn't, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Igor is asking, are you investing in Israeli legal entities only, or U.S. entities with Israeli shareholders?
So that's a good question. We do invest in American entities, but really the R&D or the headquarters need to be in Israel. Sometimes, Israeli startups are formed with a US entity that fully owns the Israeli subsidiary. That's something that's fine for us. But if it's a company that was started in the United States that has their operations in the United States, but there's, just like a small relationship with Israel, that probably wouldn't be Israeli enough for us.
Got it. We have a lot of questions about the various sectors also that you could maybe invest in, sport tech, automotive, dental, manufacturing. I guess it's a better question to ask if there's anything that you just don't invest in.
That's a good question. Yeah. The one thing that we at least so far, we just won't do is cybersecurity. And that's because we just have a difficult time evaluating any cybersecurity opportunities and assets. To us, we just don't have the expertise to distinguish what's good and what isn't, and what's practical and what's not, and the competitive landscape as well. So cybersecurity is just not for us, which is a shame, kind of, because the best cybersecurity in the world comes out of Israel. But just for our team, we can't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. We have Donnie asking your investment criteria. So I guess related to this, is there any metrics requirements, traction requirements, people requirements, anything like that for you that really strike a chord?
People, we have a saying at IIFG that we don't just invest in the horse, we invest in the jockey. We think, especially at the earlier stages, there can be a wonderful product, but if the right entrepreneurs aren't in the leadership position, it just won't work. So we oftentimes are investing more so in the entrepreneur than the product in a way.
Mhm.
So good team is very important for us.
Gotcha. And are there any metrics that these companies, obviously it varies by the industry, if it's capital intensive or not, but just say for, what you're looking at this year in healthcare, is there any, what do you like, what would you like to see in companies?
Yeah, we like to see, it's interesting with metrics. There's not certain metrics that we have to see. That kind of all depends on what the pricing is like, what the terms are, and the situation. But what we do like to see is a strategic investor, at least one, either that has invested in the company before or that is joining in the round that we're participating in. We think that strategic investors or ex-entrepreneurs really bring a good value add.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have another question here from Talor. It's does the latest crisis affect your investments? So obviously with inflation going up and maybe we're going into a recession here, does that affect the way that you're making investments?
I'm so sorry. I need to mute my email. If you can give me 1 second, because
Yeah, and feel free, guys, to keep asking those questions in the chat. And I know a few of you asked about his email, so I threw it in there as well. So please go ahead and look at that if you need it, and I'll also share it at the end after the call. So there'll be a recording of this entire session that I'll be able to share with each and every one of you in case you do have to leave early. But if you have questions for me or for Noah, please let us know. But yeah, but back to the question about the current status of the economy.
So what I apologize. What was the question? My email was making noises, so I had to go and turn it off.
Yeah, basically, with the current situation of the world and rising inflation and just job cutbacks and everything else, are you still making investments as normal? Is the status quo changed? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, we are going to be investing as normal. Actually, as a matter of fact, I think that when I think things have come down to reality a little bit more about a year ago, in my opinion. I'm sure other people feel differently, but it seemed like any idea was worth $1 billion. Like it was unbelievable. So we actually kind of shied away. We thought valuations were too rich in the recent history, which I think probably was that developed from a lot of funds that had a lot of capital. They needed to deploy capital into a limited amount of startups in a limited time frame, and that kind of just pushed up valuations. But now we're seeing things kind of go back to normal, I guess. And we think, we're going at it. But there are a lot of other investors that are getting a little hesitant given the market conditions, and are a little bit more careful, so to speak, with their investments. Whereas they see this as I'm assuming as kind of like a risky, dangerous situation. We're seeing this as an opportunistic time.
Nice. And for all these companies interested in, making an introduction to you, wanting to reach out, what's the best way for them to prepare for the meeting with you and the team?
With me to prepare for the meeting, is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think a good amount of information was on this call. So just remember what was discussed here. Check out our website. I think that's important. Basically, do a little bit of research on us, and that's it.
Very good. So in terms of the materials that they sent you, what do you want to see, and then what would be good to include inside a pitch deck, and then maybe what should they avoid?
Yeah, for sure. I think a pitch deck should include, it shouldn't be too long, in my opinion. It shouldn't be. Sometimes I get like 40-page pitch decks for a seed startup, which I think is just too long. I think you should talk about the product, the story, the team, and any prior investors, if you have anyone that you want to discuss, and that's it, really. And then the rest will be kind of discussed in meetings, in my opinion.
Very good. How many meetings do you normally have before you make an investment, just based on prior investments? Just so they have an idea, and then maybe timeline as well.
For sure, a handful. We have a lot of meetings. We want to learn a lot. We do a good amount of due diligence. I don't know if other firms at our stage do as much as us, but we kind of pride ourselves in our research that we do before making an investment. So we'll have a bunch of meetings. And timeline wise, I kind of touched upon it, but it depends on the situation that we're getting into. If there's already a lead investor, if there's not a lead investor, if terms are set, if they're not, which kind of goes alongside that. If there's any due diligence that a prior investor has done or has begun that they can share with us. So it can be from weeks to months, that realistically.
Very good. Since you're just curious, since you're focused on Israeli companies and entities, do you make like frequent trips to Israel to kind of do due diligence or just to have meetings?
Absolutely. Yeah, I just got back last week. We normally go, once a quarter, but COVID, we didn't go for 2 years, which was a bummer. But it's nice to see, at least from my last trip, Israel seems to be back to normal again and hustling and bustling again, which was nice to see. But that being said, we did get more comfortable with Zoom. Again, there's nothing like a real life meeting, which we're going to continue doing, obviously. And we did do Zoom before, given the distance. But we when I went to my last trip, I realized a bunch of the meetings that I did have in person would have been better off for both of us if we just did it on Zoom. So yeah.
That's fair. And I guess in terms of a Zoom call, is there anything that you hope that the startup does or doesn't do?
Yeah, what I would say is be on time sometimes, especially if I organize a bunch of people from my team to be there. That's a little tough for me already. And then so show up on time, and then also make sure you have good internet and good connection, or you're in a quiet place. Sometimes I'll get a call and someone's in like a loud cafe and I just can't hear anything, and can't stop the call because it's, it just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Let me see if there's any other questions here in the chat. It's mostly questions about the areas that you invest in. Let me just work from the bottom up. Sustainable food tech, is that interesting?
That is interesting. We've never done an investment in that sector, but I'm not, we'll be happy to explore it.
Yep. Class 3 interventional medical devices.
Yep.
Automotive.
Yeah. We haven't done an automotive investment, but I'm really into cars, and so is 2 of the other people on my team.
Gotcha. How many investments are you looking to do this year?
This year, as in for the rest of 2022, or like the fiscal or the year ahead?
Yeah, just say in a normal year, now that you're the way that right?
Probably a few, 2 to 3.
Mm-hmm. Got it. More questions about the areas, as you can see in the chat. So enterprise SaaS, is that interesting?
It's not something that we're super familiar, we're super involved with. I don't think the managing partners know too much about enterprise SaaS, but it's not something that we'll say no to off the bat.
Yeah, we have a question from Michael as well for nanotech advanced materials. Is that something that you do, that you're looking at?
Can you repeat the question, please?
It's, do you invest in nanotech and in advanced materials?
We have not, but we'll be open to it.
Cool. That's most of the questions I see in the chat. Please, anyone here, if you have any more questions, we have about 20 more minutes. If you want to ask any of your questions personally, just keep in mind it's not really a time to pitch your company here. But of course, I sent the email, and of course you can get in contact with them that way. But if you have any questions about their investment process, their fund, or about NOAA, please go ahead and ask those questions.
What's the process from now? Is there anything scheduled and I missed it?
The process for what? Sorry.
What are the next steps? What's planned and when?
Well, we usually we'll start off with the pitch. Usually the first pitch is just to me, and then depending on that, after that, I'll give feedback in our weekly meeting to the rest of the team, and I'll discuss kind of the company kind of at a surface level. If the rest of the team is interested in it, then we'll do a follow-up meeting with more people, not just me. And then after that, if we still like the opportunity, we will start due diligence. And then if everything's looked good, then we'll do it term sheet, continue due diligence, and then then start negotiating terms.
And just to touch on that as well, now that the number of registrations jumped a lot over the weekend, so I'll have to share with Noah all those companies. So I'm going to send him all the details that you included in the registration, so that he has that full information. Of course, you can share more if you would like, but basically that's the necessity of what he would need in order to make a determination if he wants to schedule a meeting with you. And I'll go ahead and send that follow-up information, in the next couple of days to him, and then we'll go back and forth. And then I'll send whoever is included with that an email, and then he'll go ahead and decide in that email who he would like to meet. So of course, it's not going to be everyone on here, but he'll make the determination who he does wants to meet.
All right, thank you. Looking forward to getting that list.
Mm-hmm. We have a question from Avi. It's how many companies or entities have you invested in so far?
Just through IIFG, which is Israel. We've done 4 with a follow-on. So we haven't invested in many, but also we took a break during COVID-19 because we were doing our SPV format, and at that time we were concerned about the world, and we didn't want to. We were more careful. So we started in the end of we made our first investment in 2019, and then took about a 1.5 year break during COVID, and then started again.
Awesome. Any other questions, guys? I guess it looks like there is a question here in the chat about do you normally lead? Do you follow? What's your current status quo for that?
We do both, but we do both, and we have done both. So
got it. And we touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but there's some questions about like the typical check size that you do, and if you can just touch on that.
Yeah, 500,000. We're structured in a way where we can do between 250 to 2 million, but generally we come in at around 500 grand.
We have a question from Danielle about InsurTech and medical claims. Is that something you guys are familiar with that you look at?
InsurTech, like insurance tech? Is that? Yeah, I mean, we'll look at it. We haven't done any investments in that sector, but we'll definitely still, consider it and look at it.
Awesome. And then one more question for me. It's how do you work with your existing portfolio companies? So now that you made an investment in them, what do you how do you sort of work with them now after that investment?
Yeah, for sure. So we're here to help as much as we can. We try to connect our portfolio companies with anyone within our network that they can, benefit from. For example, DrizzleX, we connected them with a lot of landlords here in California, which have, beta tested, not only become customers, but have beta tested their product before that and provided feedback to the company, which allowed them to become a better device and technology and kind of see exactly what their target market and customer base is looking for, what they like, what they don't like. And we're always here for help whenever our portfolio companies need it. We kind of pride ourselves in being there for them in any way we can.
Very cool. Any other questions, guys? All right, well, I want to go ahead and thank everyone for joining this call. I know it's late in Israel or wherever you are. Thank you for joining and taking the time here. Basically, what's going to happen from this point is I'll go ahead and share the list of companies that have registered for this session with Noah. He'll go ahead and review all those details and get in touch with me about the companies that he wants to meet. And then so I will reach out to each one of you that he selects and would like to have a meeting with. And then you can go ahead and make those arrangements, and then we both can follow up from there. All the information from this session will be sent as a follow-up email to all of you. So I'll have a link to the YouTube video of this entire session. But that's it. Thank you for joining, and I really appreciate the time, and thank you, Noah, for obviously giving us those insights and what you do and taking the time as well. So I know you could be looking at some companies or doing a lot of many other things. So really appreciate your time as well.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.